My name is Nancy Norwood. I'm the Curator for European Art here at the Memorial Art Gallery, and I was the presenting curator for this exhibition, Renaissance Impressions, Prints from the Kirk Edward Long Collection, a great private collection of Mannerist 16th-century prints that was brought to us by the American Federation of Arts, and they really represent this new development in the arts. Once paper became so widely available, printmaking really took off. What happened after that, it was like a boom. It was like the internet today. You have artists traveling from Germany to Italy. You have Italian prints being in France. Those images were then used by other artists to create other art forms. And so you have this spread of images, and you have the development of a publishing industry, because publishers were commissioning printmakers to make prints that could then be sold to a new avocation of collectors who were widely collecting even at the time. So you really saw these new developments happening in the arts that hadn't happened before. And that's one of the things that's so exciting about the exhibition and about the printmaking from this period. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that 16th century European geography looks pretty different from what it does today. So, for example, Italy was not Italy until the 19th century. Italy was really a combination of the Papal States, a series of kingdoms and duchies and free states. Then you have the Holy Roman Empire, which includes the present-day country of Germany. Switzerland was a little bit on the part of that. There were other areas that sort of formed this Germanic culture. Then in France, you have the Kingdom of France, run and started by King Francis I, who was very, very involved in the arts. And then you have the Low Countries, which are the Netherlands and Belgium today. We created this very simple map, and then we put several works from those areas next to this map. This was also a way of dividing up the 82 prints so that they were really in bite-sized pieces for people. They learn about the collection with, say, 15 prints. Then there are 4 prints that represent the geographic areas. And so that allows people to sort of flow in the exhibition a little bit more easily, rather than just sort of giving them 82 prints to look at all at once. So the 3 techniques that were used in this, by the printmakers in this exhibition are woodcut, engraving, and etching. And they're 3 related but different techniques. One thing we really wanted to do in this exhibition was show how important and how skilled these craftspeople were. They weren't just craftspeople, they were artists in their own right. And because the detail is really what is so important, we actually put these magnifying glasses into the exhibition, but we also created a video that explores each of these techniques. We worked with a faculty member at the University of Rochester, and she used motifs from the actual prints to create, and it's a silent video, 6 minutes, but it really gives the visitor an idea of the process that was created. And then the visitor can take that knowledge with them as they look at the prints in the show. I've heard people say, just anecdotally, that the technique section is really what made the difference for them. This section in particular will give the visitor a much, much greater appreciation for the talent and the technique involved and how skilled these craftspeople were at the time and how skilled the artists were. Really, printmakers became artists in their own right. They weren't just reproducing things. Some of the prints they created, not only were they just technically incredible, they were also very creative, and they sort of showed off how erudite they were, how much literature they knew, how much philosophy they knew, how much they knew about the other arts. So, it was really an extraordinary time. We decided to have a separate small section on the thematic categories, because those do overlap between all of the different regions. And they basically break down into 4. One is this really, this renewed interest in classical, in particular sculpture and architecture, but also in classical mythology. The gods and goddesses and classical history were a huge, huge subject matter for a lot of these artists, whether they were Italian or in the North. A second area of interest was New and Old Testament themes. Most of Europe was Christian at the time, whether they were Protestant or Catholic. And so these would have been familiar to them, even if they're not to us today. A third subject matter would have been allegory, which was also very strong in literature, but also in art. And so it's sort of a visual language of symbols. What do a donkey's ears mean, for example? There's a certain amount of deciphering that we need to do that maybe they didn't need to do, or certain people didn't need to do at the time. So you'll see in this exhibition that a lot of the themes are macabre. They're dark, they're about death, they're about witches, they're very enigmatic and they're hard to penetrate. So that's sort of a separate theme that we wanted to mention, we wanted to draw out for people. This is one of my favorite prints in the exhibition. It's called The Witch's Procession by Musi. And it's actually probably one of the most debated prints from the 16th century onward, and people have still not really figured out what it's about. But what we do know is it's something about witches. Is it the triumph of witchcraft? Hard to know, but what we do have here is this very skeletal form. There's a witch here riding on top with her hair streaming in the background, and then there are all of these babies trapped in the bones of the rib cage. The goats in this period were they were referencing Satan, referencing evil. So you have goats here who are like moving the procession this way. You have these beautiful young men drawing the procession. And then you have this very, very strange creature here, which is sort of a skeletal goat with a wing and these very, very strange claws, paws, hoofs. A complete, fantastic image. And it's so creative and it's just so imaginative. And one thing that I really love about it is that there is so much tension in this. So you have the procession being drawn in this direction, and then you have the rushes and the reeds blowing in this direction. You have all of these discombobulated birds, and you have this incredible tension from both sides, with the wind coming this way and the movement going this way. And to me, this is just a poster child for that movement that we call mannerism. This is another one of my favorite prints in the exhibition. It's called The Aviary of Death. It's very seductive and it fools people. It's an etching and an engraving, so there's a certain softness to it that you may not get with a straight engraving. In the foreground here, you have this group of musicians who are sort of in this serene landscape. Here you have two students and a scholar, and then you have these courtiers up here leaning over, looking, and all very serious, but nothing really scary, until you look here and you have death. You have these skeletals coming out here, and they're actually holding these hunting implements. This is called for hunting owls. And here you have, this is not a figure of death, this is a dead person, this is a cadaver. And so really what you have is death out there hunting souls. And then if you look in the background, you have another figure of death, another skeleton, very pale, chasing people into a net, catching them. There's a ship of death sailing off into the sea with a skull and crossbones on it. It's a masterful piece of imagination, I think, because it's presenting this terrifying scene in a very soft, pastoral way. One thing that we did here at MAG that we had permission from AFA was to integrate decorative arts from our permanent collection of 16th century decorative arts, where the artist would use images from print sources in the 16th century, from contemporary print sources, to create works in other media. And so we've included works in stained glass, in enamel, in ceramic, metalwork, armor, suit of armor that has etchings that were taken directly from prints, because it does really extend the reach of the show into other art forms, and it expands the whole meaning of it. What happened with this sort of print boom, if you want to call it that, is other artists were actually inspired to use those images. So there was just a huge selection of imagery, and so there was an explosion of imagery in other art sources, other art forms, as well as in printmaking. So you had these stained glass artists, for example, they had access to these prints made by, for example, a northern French stained glass maker had access to a print from a German, Albrecht Dürer, and the Virgin and Child with a monkey by Dürer. The monkey is missing in this stained glass. The artist, for whatever reason, wanted putti, so turned to an Italian print by Raimondi and put in these 3 dancing putti figures. And so it's this real cross-cultural thing where you have a Northern French artist, an Italian printmaker, a German printmaker, and you have your piece of glass. Another genre that developed in this period is a genre called grotesques, and they're called that because they were first discovered in these ancient Roman grottos, and they're really an opportunity for printmakers. For the imagination really flourished with these because you could pretty much do anything. So this is a series of grotesques that have the gods and goddesses at the center, and then there are these extraordinary images all the way around. They're usually symmetrical, so if you fold them, they would be like that. They're about 2 inches by 3 inches tall, each one of them, and this is when the magnifying glass would really come in handy, because you can't really see them very well without that. But for example, here you have these figures that they're satyrs, and then you have these fascinating animals with these curling tails. Here you have these women flying out of the ocean waves, and artists are really having, you can tell, they're having fun. They're showing off too. They're showing off their technical ability, but also their creativity. This is a print by Albrecht Dürer, who really was one of the great printmakers of the 16th century. And it's The Harrowing of Hell, or Christ in Limbo. It refers to the story of what happened between Christ's death on Friday and the resurrection on Sunday. You have this image of Christ in limbo, leaning in to pull these figures out of limbo. So this figure we can identify because John the Baptist is usually depicted with a beard and a hair shirt, which is here. And you can tell this is a woodcut. So remember, this is being carved like that. It's really fine, so finely done. But you have Jesus reaching in, pulling him out, and then you can see behind him all of these figures. These are the people who are already out. Here we know this is, for example, this figure, this holding this fruit and this crucifix is Adam. We know that by the fruit, the apple that was eaten in the garden. Standing behind him is Eve. And then there are a variety of other figures. One thing that I really love about this print, though, is the forces, right? The way that hell is depicted. So you have this demon's face right here, and then you have this threatening figure here with the spear. They're all sort of trying to attack, and so it was very risky to go into hell. And I think that Dürer has shown this better than any artist of the period that I've ever seen. And we know, of course, it's an Albrecht Dürer print because this is his monogram. And Dürer and several of the artists in the exhibition put their monogram there. So you have here the A, and then you have the D. I was very excited when the museum decided to take this exhibition because my field is medieval and Renaissance art, even though I handle all the European art for the museum. And it was really a great opportunity to work with the first-class collection of prints. But once they got here, I realized that every single one of these prints was just stellar. And so it was an opportunity for me to work with these great works of art. And I was given so much freedom by AFA to really do things that I thought would be meaningful to our visitors in Rochester. But also, maintain the integrity, obviously, of the scholarly exhibition that this is, but to make it somewhat more accessible to as many people as possible.